Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We are a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast. Thank you so much. If you are a daily listener, we really appreciate our everydayers out there. And if you're new to the show, just stumbling across us and you've enjoyed it so far, you've made it through the full, we'll be about 30 minutes into the show. We really appreciate that. And hopefully, if you do enjoy it, you do give us a subscribe. Maybe hit the little notification bell and a little like, smash that like button, as they say on YouTube. That would be greatly appreciated. Leave us a comment. Leaving comments. Comments really help with the algorithms and helps get the, it helps, I don't know, helps people see it, I suppose, for lack of a better phrase there.
It's all about the algorithm. All about the algorithm.
Yeah, I don't know how the internet works, but apparently the more comments, the more likes, the more likely people are going to stumble upon
I get that interaction.
video. And we can help grow the show, right? Help grow the podcast. That's what we all want here on Locked On Leafs. All right. So I guess the second half of the season started, a couple of weeks ago after game 41 going into game 42. That's when the second half truly started. But post All-Star break is like the unofficial second half. And technically the Maple Leafs, they already got one game out of the way. A loss to the New York Islanders. But I thought it'd be fun to kind of take a look at a couple of storylines that we'll be keeping an eye on, over the course of the next few weeks into the second half of this season. So here's a couple that I got. You can let me know if you've got some things that you're keeping an eye on as well, Dave. But I think right now, like a big story that we're all going to be keeping an eye on in Leafs Nation is Austin's chase for 70. Like, it's in play. It's totally in play. He's on pace for, I think, maybe now 69 goals or something around that range, 68, 69, 70 goals. Like, can he actually be the first to get to 70 since like 93? Like, can he actually get it done? It would be incredible. It'd be such a feather in the cap for him to do so. Ovi never did it. Obviously, Crosby didn't do it. And like, no one has done this since 93. So if Austin Matthews can get it done, that would be outstanding. So that's one storyline that I think we're all going to be chasing. And another one that I kind of want to keep an eye on here, and it's something that we touched on in the previous segment when we were talking about the lack of secondary scoring, is, will someone emerge with some secondary scoring? Is there someone who's going to finally put things together and put together a strong second half? I'm curious, maybe, is there someone who you think really struggled in the first half that you believe is going to have a big second half for the Maple Leafs?
It's got to be Tyler Bertuzzi.
Tyler Bertuzzi, Matthew Nyes, Max Domi. Like, I think all three of those players fit in the same bill where you got to get more out of them.
I'll put one on the blue line, and he was a bit of a spotlight today. If you haven't read David Alter's piece, Timothy Liljegren.
Yes.
He's a player that I had higher expectations for going into this year. I thought he was going to be a bona fide, cement himself into the top four with either with a Jake McCabe as his partner, and it hasn't happened. And unfortunately, he was the one that was the culprit on the goal, the breakaway goal that has left Sheldon Keefe pulling out whatever gray hairs he has right now.
White hairs.
Simply put, like, we talk about this team needing to go out and trade for a defenseman. But I'm also remain adamant that you also need to get some of that improvement internally. Timothy Liljegren, as a younger defenseman that you've spent a lot of time in developing and investing to be a top four defenseman, hasn't done it consistently enough, and that's something that I think they need to see him improve. They really do need to see him improve, because if not, when you talk about making a trade to go out and upgrade, I wouldn't be surprised if you hear his name being thrown out there if they need to go out and make an upgrade.
I agree. I completely agree. I'm curious how many games he's played, because they say, usually for defensemen, it'll take you about 200 games to figure out who you are in the NHL. He's played 172 games. He's pretty well there. Like, you pretty much know what he is. And he's a third pair defenseman. That's what he is. He's a third pair guy who, could do a little bit of everything. Like he can play on your PK, he can play on your second unit. He's got a little bit of a shot. He can get a little bit aggressive, but he's really a master of none, I guess, which is why he's a third pair guy, And luckily he's a right shot player, so that helps him. There's not, people are always looking for right shot blue liners. But ultimately, yeah, he's someone who for sure needs to step up because I don't think his spot in the lineup going forward is necessarily guaranteed because, hey, if they do go out and add a top 4 right shot defenseman, like let's say the name Chris Tanev keeps coming up. If they add Chris Tanev to this lineup, who do you think's coming out?
Yeah, exactly. Like it is going to be TJ Brodie's going to get slot further down the lineup, and it's going to be Timothy Liljegren coming out.
Either Timothy Liljegren or
Giordano.
Giordano. I mean, they'll alternate, right? Like either way, he's not going to have a nightly spot in this lineup, or he'll have to fight to keep that nightly spot at the very least. If the Leafs do go out and make that move that we all kind of are expecting to happen, which leads me to another storyline. What do the Leafs do at the deadline? Where do you sit on this, Dave? Like, which camp are you in? Do you think that no matter what, the Leafs still need to try and get something out of this season and still are going to have to be, active buyers? Or do you sit in a camp where, you think the Leafs actually, they got to prove something to Treliving between now and the deadline for him to make a sizable deal? Where do you sit?
If I'm Brad Treliving, I have like a box with that with a key and a lock with that first round pick. That key, nothing is being happening with that first round pick right now. You are not trading that first round pick. I don't think it's worth it. They've spent too much assets. They don't have a third round pick for the next 3 years. Second round pick. Sorry. After this year, they won't have first round picks really to give out either, right? Like,
did you hear the latest on the Tanev, by the way? Apparently, Calgary told Toronto. So the price is like a second and like a prospect for Tanev, or a second and a younger.
Yeah, I heard LeBron initially saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the price for Chris Tanev. And apparently, since Toronto doesn't have a second, then the price is a first. They would have to get their first round pick to get it done.
I'm sorry. The only way you can ever justify paying a first round pick for Chris Tanev is if you get a contract included with that. And even then, what does that contract look like? We know his injury history. Can you rely on him to be an 80? You can't rely on him to be 82 game guy. He hasn't really been. You're like looking in like the 70 range for Chris Tanev,
which is fine if he can be healthy for the playoffs. As long as he plays every playoff game, I think you'll take 65 regular season games of Tanev if he can play 25 games in the playoffs and bring you home a Stanley Cup. You'll take that 10 times out of 10.
The thing is there? I don't think they're a Chris Tanev away from winning where they need to go, and that's where I'm at right now. They need more than that, and I think Brad Treliving's going to realize that, and maybe he'll make a small move to add some depth. I just don't think if he makes the big swing, he's not going to have enough. It's not going to be enough.
So, are you saying this as if you were Brad Treliving, or are you saying this as David Morassutti?
If I was Brad Treliving, I wouldn't do it. Personally, I would not do it because you're throwing yourself into an even harder situation in the offseason where you're going to have to make even more moves to make this team better. Like, you don't have a lot of defensemen past this year.
Can I say something that is maybe equally as blasphemous?
Uh-oh.
Not that what you said is blasphemous, I suppose, but if you are not a buyer, do you then consider being a seller?
I would consider it.
Like, if you're not going to actively buy, like, for me, standing pat isn't good enough.
No.
Because, I don't think you're going to re-sign some of these guys next year anyways, if you're just standing pat because you've realized this ain't the year. You need picks and prospects pretty bad.
Yes.
Recoup some of them so that you can use those in the future to make deals that you need to get, right?
Not only do you need picks and prospects, you need young players.
And young players. But, like, if you sit there, if you're Brad Treliving, to me, like, if I had to power rank what should the Leafs do, I think they should buy. I do think they should, but I don't think the second scenario is standing pat. I think it's buy. And if you're not going to buy and you realize this team isn't good enough to win a championship, I'm not pushing the chips in to improve this team. Then I think it's all right. Well, then what can you get for Tyler Bertuzzi? What can you get for Max Domi? Is TJ Brody attractive to teams out there? You know what I mean? Like, what can you start to get for some of these players? That may be a blasphemous thing to say, but if you decide that this year ain't it, you might as well start looking to next season. If those guys aren't going to be on your roster next season anyways, get something for it. I don't know. That's just me.
Well, and I've heard that argument too. The problem with Tyler Bertuzzi is he does have a no movement clause, but I mean, if he gets asked to waive it, he might consider it if it means going to maybe a team that has, a contender.
Well, you're trading for Tyler Bertuzzi pending UFA. You're probably going for it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I wouldn't. I just think, you know what, with the way they played this year, their coach just said it. They've only played good enough half the time. To me, that's not a ringing endorsement for this group.
No, yeah, that's from their coach. From the coach. They've got how many games between now and the trade deadline? Let me quickly look that up. Toronto schedule. Deadline's what? The 8th? March 8th. So, like, we got a month to go, which means there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 games. There's 15 games between now and the trade deadline for the Maple Leafs to prove to Brad Treliving that they can play with a level of consistency that can work in the playoffs. If he doesn't prove that between now and March 8th, and who they play March 7th? The Boston Bruins. Fun stuff. If they don't prove that between now and then, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what they do this season. Like I said, there's usually two camps. There is a camp there that says no matter what, you gotta go for it. That's what this team is. They're in a win now mode. They still gotta go for it no matter what. And then there is that other camp that's a little more hesitant to do so. Where Brad Treliving sits, I don't know. Maybe that's an exercise that we can kind of take a look at between now and the deadline. Perhaps maybe later on this week or next week, we can look back on Brad Treliving's previous deadlines in Calgary and maybe see if we can see some tendencies as to what he likes to do in trade deadline. Because it's a new GM. We don't really know much about how Treliving operates. Maybe that's a fun little exercise that we could do, over the next week or two. Let us know in the comment section down below if that would interest you going forward.